the Can't Stop the Growth podcast invested as our exclusive sponsor for the 2023 PeopleForward Impact Awards. Wow, we are grateful. If you want to experience a B2B podcast that is both impacting internal employee growth and advancing leader listeners across the globe, this show is it. We know we can't stop the growth of this show. It will soon be the #1 podcast in the home services category. Thank you to the host and 2022 PFN Award winner, Chad Peterman. The wait is over. The 2023 PeopleForward Impact Awards are here, and you get the best of the best podcast hosts, Rachel Downey, founder of Share Your Genius, leading this conversation. The podcast GOAT and 2023 award winner coming right up.
And the winner is Mark Hamilton, CEO and president of Harcross Chemicals, Inc. He is one of our winners of the PeopleForward Network Impact Awards. He was recommended and nominated by Dr. Rosie Ward. And the one word that describes Mark is caring. In an industry that is not traditionally warm and fuzzy, Mark has shown the power of putting people first and investing in their culture and leadership. Mark is humble, down to earth, and always makes time for all of his employees, from executives to truck drivers and everyone in between. He continues to invest in nurturing Harcross's culture and equipping their culture ambassadors and leaders to be stewards of their why and hows. When an area is struggling, Mark doesn't hesitate to listen to the people and then align resources and interventions to help people work through challenges. Mark has been an active member of the Senior Leader Network with Conscious Capitalism, which is focused on elevating humanity through business. He prioritizes the safety and well-being of Harcross's employees and is always focused on doing what is right. As an aside, Mark took over as CEO just before the pandemic hit. He says that were it not for the work they had already done to focus on their culture and leadership, they would have struggled. Instead, they grew and had record years in 2021 and 2022. Mark is retiring in 24, and I think this would be a fitting way to honor him and his legacy. Well, you can be the judge of that after you listen to the conversation with Mark. How does that make you feel to listen to that?
Well, it's kind of humbling and it's gratifying, I guess, to hear that, especially coming from Dr. Ward. Rosie is a pretty incredible person in her own right. So it means a lot to me to have her express words about me that way.
I'd love to unpack your journey and your story a little bit more. As we do that, I'm curious, what does PeopleForward leader mean to you?
Well, I think it resonates with my belief in servant leadership, another way of, referring to people forward. It's a form of, in my opinion, just the natural way one should lead. If you're leading people and you don't put them first, then you're going to be out there by yourself leading no one. So it just really makes a lot of sense to me to take the responsibility of being a leader, with the #1 responsibility being that you're leading a group of people and that those people matter, and that the only way we're going to be successful as a group would be to make sure that we're engaging with each other in a very fruitful way.
Back up for me a little bit. And I have to imagine that at some point in your career, there was somebody who showcased to you in some way, shape, or form that embodied that PeopleForward leadership, that servant leadership. Who was that for you?
There were a couple of people, but it really wasn't until late in my career that I really thought of myself as being somebody capable of being a CEO. I had modest success that I'd become a middle manager, but it wasn't until I was well into my 50s that actually it was a coworker of mine that saw what I was doing at that point, where I had worked my way up to being appointed as a global VP for the company I worked for previous to Harcross. And we were together on a global work group because it was a global company, had various countries where people would participate. And he thought I was doing a good job leading that work group. And he worked in HR. And he said, "Have you ever thought about putting your name in the hat, so to speak, to be a CEO?" And it blew my mind. And I grew up in a working class family. Yeah, I'm the youngest of 3 brothers, and my oldest brother was the first in our entire family that ever graduated college. I think I'm the only one still in my extended family that has a master's degree. So I didn't feel like I was part of that blue blood that would be considered for such a thing, but he made me think about it. And then, fast forward several years, I didn't quite get the CEO position with that company, but I was in consideration because the CEO was retiring. But then I got the opportunity at Harcross, and the chair of the board now, my predecessor as CEO, saw something in me that offered me first to be COO, and then moved on from there when he wanted to step back, and the board appointed me CEO. So I think that person inspires me a lot, and that's Kevin Myrna, who was my predecessor at Harcross. But that young man in the hallway that kind of got that thought in my mind, I'd say that's what really got me to question myself and say, wait a minute, why can't I be?
He planted the seed.
He did. He did.
Thinking of even just both of those people that you talked about, when you think about yourself in the leadership position that you're in, how did those people believing in you or seeing something in you, how has that helped you lead your people now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I look for that in others, right? So I've got a bunch of direct reports, and ultimately all the, employee owners of Harcross. I say employee owners because we're a 100% employee owned company. That again, my responsibility as senior leader is to look to develop those people. And every once in a while, you do encounter somebody. I can think of half a dozen right now in our company that could sit in my seat someday. And what can I do to instill that confidence in them, much like that coworker did for me, and also that Kevin did later on by giving me a chance. It's a tremendous responsibility, but it's really also kind of fun when you have the ability to do that.
When in your journey of CEO, and maybe it happened before you officially started, but when did you recognize like, no, 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 I am like the CEO, like I can do this? Did you have like kind of that moment?
Boy, to be honest with you, you talked about in the thing that Rosie wrote about us being prepared for the pandemic as an organization. I had been serving as COO, but Kevin was still CEO for about a year and a half. And then the start of 2020, I was given that opportunity to be CEO. I was a little nervous about it. I think I was suffering a bit from the imposter syndrome, even though that I had improved by thinking about that over the years. Now that I was in the seat, I'm thinking, oh man, what's going on here? But anyway, I think it was the work that I did personally with Rosie. I mean, Rosie did a lot with the senior leaders before that, where we were going through exercises of understanding who we were, what our barriers to success were, what our blind spots were, what our strengths were. And if I had not done that work with her, and even having subsequent conversations with Rosie to really center myself and say, no, no, I can do this. Thanks to that training, it allowed me to be my authentic self. Really, that's the biggest thing that I think Rosie did for me, was to say, hey, just be you. It's okay. People may like that. And
Who knows?
it seems like that works the best when I am being myself.
Well, so let's talk about yourself a little bit more. Obviously, you're very involved with helping people and pouring into them. You're very connected with conscious capitalism. Like, why is that so important to you?
I think capitalism is the way to go overall if it's done right. And I'm committed to organizations that promote capitalism in a conscious way, because the enemy of capitalism is greed, because capitalism allows you to amass wealth, and some people take it too far at the expense of others, and as a result, then capitalism becomes something evil in some people's minds. But I really go out of my way to align myself with organizations and people that view, no, capitalism is a way to generate forward growth, to generate great ideas, to make it a better society if it's done in the right way. If you're giving back to all the stakeholders involved in your organization, whatever it might be, even if it's your own business, that is the way that we move humanity forward in the most positive way.
How did you come to that belief?
I think over the years, I've been with people that get frustrated and feel left out. And I think it's because a lot of times people are forgetting that, it starts with you and you're your own first leader. Another thing that had a big impact on my leadership journey was I was part of a leadership training called Team Trek that's still in existence, based out of Arkansas. And their main, most of these leadership trainings are saying pretty much the same message, but they may emphasize some areas more than others. And 100% responsibility is their absolute foundation to everything. So that you take responsibility for what you do, both right and wrong, to own up to things, to also focus on what you can control rather than things that you can't control in a positive way. I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but I think that I've seen a lot of examples that way where people took responsibility for their lives. And again, some people have more adversity than others, but that also aren't afraid to let other people help them at the same time. That's how humanity works best.
I have to imagine too, you mentioned coming from a working class family. And so I imagine that there's some history or example there of creating opportunity for people. And I don't know if you want to expand upon even the way that you grew up that has helped you as a leader.
Yeah, boy, thinking back on it, I'm 68 years old now, so that's going back a ways. But when I was born, the third child of a family of where my dad worked, he was a union worker, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I don't know how they ever things were easier then. I think in being able to buy a house or whatever. They were in the first house that they had a big mortgage. They're feeding these growing boys that we would eat them out of house and home. There was nothing on the walls per se, a couple of photographs, things like that. I look at old, pictures, baby pictures, little kid pictures, and they just gave everything to the family, particularly to the children, to give them an opportunity so that they could have a life that was a little bit better than theirs. But looking back on it, they had a pretty wonderful life just as it was. We never wanted for anything, but the love in that house is the dedication to the family is what got us through. So in my mind, they're pretty remarkable that they were able to do that, uh, given those circumstances.
Your family, it sounds like, sort of instilled in you that people first mentality, that people forward mentality. Like they were serving you like your parents and they were giving you an opportunity to reach your potential and whatever that looked like. And it sounds like that's how you've led your team. Is that a fair perspective?
I hope people see it that way. I mean, that's what I tried to do. I have my selfish moments like everybody, but yeah, I think I feel best about myself and I feel best about my company when we're all working as a team, helping each other. And that's when Harcross is at its best too. So that's what makes it fun.
What are the characteristics or attributes of a people forward leader?
Well, early on, I think this has got to be 30 years ago. One of the first pieces of training that I had at a company I worked for 30 years ago was a Zenger Miller training. And I don't even know if it still exists. But there was one piece to that that helped me because I had this tendency, we all have, our sort of not necessarily blind spots, but those areas that we need to work on. And I would let my personal view of somebody when we had a disagreement get in the way of finding a resolution. And they had a quote that as part of their tenets of the training, and I'll never forget it was focus on the situation, not the individual. In other words, give somebody a benefit of the doubt. Don't make it personal. Let's focus in on where that area is that we disagree. That had a big impact on me to say, oh, wow, that's the way a team should work. Let's not make this personal. Hey, if we don't agree on this path forward, let's talk it out. Let's look at that situation and not make it a personal disagreement. That had a big effect on me. And then you couple with that years later on that 100% responsibility. Those were the things that I think drove me early on into the spot I am right now.
Why do you think that lesson was so impactful for you? Had you experienced the opposite?
Yeah, because when I would get into that individual disagreement where I was taking it personally or even, thinking, judging somebody else rather than being curious, it wasn't a good feeling when you were honest with yourself. Nobody walks away in a better place when it ends up like that. So it helped me really be a better person, which allowed me, I think, to be a better leader. So that's why it sticks with me to this day. Because every once in a while, we have old people in our lives that sometimes that they can trigger you, but I have something to center back on. And when I reflect on it and say, hey, wait a minute, take a pause here. Am I making this personal rather than focusing on what the issue is?
I like how you frame that too. I think that's really interesting how you frame that of by becoming a better person, it allows me to become a better leader. So, like outside of the examples you've given, what are some ways that you've worked on being kind of a better person so that you can be a better leader?
Yeah, that being honest with myself, really. And again, I'll go back and underscore the work I did with Rosie. Like I said, I'm 68 years old now, and I'm still learning every day, and to recognize that, to learn more about find ways to make myself a better person. I'm sure if you talk to my wife, she would give you a lot of areas where I could improve on being a better person. But I think that's true with any really solid relationship. She knows me the best. But yeah, I think just having that mindset, that learner mindset, and being curious. I think it came up in Ted Lasso. I don't know if you've watched Ted Lasso, but
Yeah.
the whole thing about being curious rather than judgmental.
Goldfish. There's some goldfish scenario, like
Yeah.
this analogy there.
Yeah. Or the dart scene when Rupert thinks he's going to take him on the darts. And he said, well, if you'd been curious, Rupert, you would have asked, hey, have you ever played darts? And he shared with him that every Sunday he would play for 4 hours with his dad. But anyway.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm hearing you say learner's mentality, like being curious, staying objective of the situation, like focus on the situation, not the personal kind of attack potentially that you could definitely go down. 100% accountability. Talk to me about how some of those principles or more helped you as a CEO. Like you stepped into the role of CEO and then the world
Mhm.
kind of fell apart. Tell me more about that experience.
Yeah, little panicked at first. How do we keep this company together? Because Harcross is being a chemical company was considered an essential business. So we had to stay open. We were making things that sanitizers and raw materials for that sort of thing, cleaning products, very important to keep those things in production certainly as we entered the pandemic. So my first task as senior leader was how do we stay connected? Because all of the frontline workers had to keep coming in. How do we make it safe, first of all, for them to come in? How do we face when people possibly get infected by the virus, and how do we handle that? And then I think the most important thing, how to keep the company connected, because a lot of the support groups were shifted to work from home to keep things safe. So how do we run the company effectively and stay connected? And I think that's where Rosie in her write-up was talking about the work that we've done with our culture ambassadors really got us through that, because we had already built a network with her help of centering on what our why is and our hows, and we were able to lean on that and use Zoom phone calls. I was using my iPhone, sitting on my front porch filming videos to send out to the employees just to keep them updated on what was going on. My dog Otis became a star during that because he would show up in the videos. So we tried to make it as fun as possible, if that makes sense, during a pandemic to keep people thinking positive. Because, boy, you don't want to, there's already enough to feel pessimistic about when you're in that situation, but you have to find those pieces of optimism. That was the biggest challenge, I think, as I had as a leader to do that.
Is keep the positive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, like, I always think of somebody in your position, a CEO, you have to have a really strong mindset because the peaks and valleys can be really low and really high. Curious how you kept that positive mindset when so much information was coming at you and so much was changing. And I mean, again, you were like, you kind of went through this journey of accepting that you could become a CEO. You step into it and then it's like, let's go. So I'm just curious how you maintain that performance.
Well, I think I'm blessed with a nature that sees the glass as half full, just really the way I think I'm wired. So I do think that in a lot of ways, from that standpoint, I was probably in the right place at the right time to take that leadership challenge, because it helped me, again, be 100% responsible for how I was going to react to this situation, and understanding that other people were looking at me and wanting to feel at least that they weren't going to lose a job, that more importantly, maybe that things were not going to fall apart in our society and things like that. And I didn't know, quite frankly, but I leaned in on, no, things are going to be okay. We're going to stay together and we're going to get through this. That is the way I'm wired, but the training I've had across the years has helped me how to really capitalize on that and to use it properly.
What do you hope people remember or take away from your leadership as an example?
I hope people recognize or think of me as humble, because the other thing that I think I've been successful with in my leadership style is that I'm not afraid when I'm not the smartest person in the room. In fact, I'm most often not the smartest person in the room. And if I find that I am the smartest person in the room, I'm stealing from a quote. I think it's from Michael Dell. He said, if you find that's the case, invite more people in the room, because it's the only way to really to improve, right? So I love surrounding myself with very talented people, and that would be my advice to leaders if they ask me, why do you think you've been somewhat successful? So I would hope that people would remember me that way. uh, that I looked to find a good team, a strong team of people, and that I wasn't too caught up in myself.
Well, here's my last question for you. The thing that really hit me is when you think about somebody in your position and all of the things that you all have gone through, the word that Rosie chose was caring. Like, how do you show caring as a leader? If you were to advise somebody who's like, I want to be caring as a leader, how would you advise them to show that?
I think you have to listen to people and truly listen. Again, that curious mindset rather than just hearing the words, really try to find out where the person's coming from, or depending on if you're speaking with a group, or but particularly with individuals. And I think that helps you be a more caring individual if you truly see them. Also understanding that everybody has challenges that you may not be aware of. So again, to be more curious to, because even if somebody's coming at something in a way that I strongly disagree with, or I feel like they're not being a very positive person at that time, how do I try to steer them back because I care about them? Rather than just to try to shut them down, to try to probe a little bit and find out why they're coming from that aspect. A lot of times, too, if you really truly listen, you realize that there are some issues that may not just be with that individual, that they may be happening throughout the organization that you need to hear. And that's where you don't want to be blind and tone deaf and realize that, ooh, we need to improve that. And the only way that people are going to feel comfortable to come to you to make suggestions is if you're at least caring enough to listen. I think the importance, it kind of tacks onto the caring, the importance to, if you can, not everybody's blessed to do this, but I think if you get out and travel, you realize, particularly that as I was blessed in the company I was with before Harcross, I did a lot of global travel. You realize that we really are a lot closer than it appears. I think it was Mark Twain that said travel is the antidote for prejudice and narrow-mindedness and bigotry. I think that helped shape me as a leader too, having that opportunity. But I think it's opening your heart and mind to people that may not look like you and may not sound like you is a real way to improve. And boy, we need that more now than ever in the world.
I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing a snapshot of your journey. And congratulations on the award. You clearly deserve it. If somebody wants to connect with you, what would you tell them to do?
Well, I'm active on LinkedIn, so they can always send me a message there.
Well, thank you, Mark. This was really great. Jotted down several notes that I'm going to apply myself. Really an honor to learn from you today. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate that. And I enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you for listening to this episode featuring the PeopleForward Network Impact Awards. Feel free to subscribe or hit that follow button wherever you listen to podcasts so that you can learn more from these PeopleForward leaders.